Right. Never actually wondered what the final boss for irritable bowel syndrome was, but I guess I know now, looking at the size of the audience. Also managed to eat some chocolate without actually looking at what was on the packet. Turns out it's Tabasco sauce. So no matter how this goes, I think my inside's going on a bit of an adventure tonight, unfortunately. Right. Just trying to start this quickly, and to convince you that I'm not essentially full of shit. My name is Christos. Not an intentional pun for once. My name is Christos, also known as Failnaut. I work as a content producer, I also work as a writer and a game developer. These are some of the companies that I've done really high-level stuff for, as a marketing content producer and a copywriter and things like that. These are some of the people I've written for as freelance writer and freelance journalist. And these are some of the people that tend to put my words on web pages for some godforsaken reason. Right. So, I wanted to come here today to talk to you about marketing, but also to kind of prove to you that marketing isn't this horrible form of unbridled wankery that you see on the internet on a regular basis, run by people in suits and focused on numbers and figures. Marketing can actually be an incredibly friendly, wonderful, joyous, personal thing. So to give you sort of a brief idea of what we're going to be talking about, today we're going to be talking about social media and content, and trying to allow you to find ways to get your game out to people that normally wouldn't see it or wouldn't know about it, because there are games out there that are literally just mind-blowingly good that nobody knows about. Put your hands up if you've ever heard of a Metroidvania called Environmental Station Alpha. Right, exactly. Like 2-3 people. Like, it's genuinely one of the most visually impressive, mechanically tight Metroidvanias I've ever seen, Metroid Fusion included, and nobody knows about it. And that's not for lack of trying on the developer, but it's just simply a case of trying to find better, cooler, more modern ways to talk about your game. So, marketing is a bit of an icky discipline. People tend not to like it very much, I found. I used to work in SEO, which is basically, if the average person working in marketing is Frodo, people who work in SEO are Gollum. It's a bit unfortunate, but the reason you should give a shit about it is because it sells games. It sells your games, it makes you famous, it can make your dog famous. It teaches you outside the box thinking, and that's quite cool. And it ties into social media pretty well, because when you're selling something through traditional channels, so like banner adverts or trailers and things, you generally got you already know how all of this stuff works, you've seen it before and things like that, but social media over the last 5 years has really sprung up and become this huge thing that everybody uses and everybody talks about, but quite a few people tend not to really know how to use it that well, so that's something I'm hoping to teach you. I'd like to start by talking about a couple of common mistakes. I guess there was a reason for the cat videos coming earlier. One of the main mistakes I tend to see when people are marketing their game tends to be timing, especially on social media. So, several days ago, I got an IM on Skype from Byron, who was working on containment protocol, and he had a brand new video on YouTube showcasing some of the game. And he wasn't really that sure about when to send it out, what to do with it. He was thinking of sending it out, I think, that evening. So I panicked slightly and asked him to stop what he was doing. And instead, I said to him, well, it's Thursday today, so I tell you what, why don't you tweet it out at 10 a.m. tomorrow, 3 p.m. tomorrow, 6 p.m. tomorrow, and 11 a.m. on Monday. And he did, and it worked. And the reason it worked is because rather than tweeting out at a time where everybody has literally stopped giving a shit about life and is quite happy watching the X Factor, tweet out 10 a.m. GMT, which is when everyone gets to work here and has settled in enough to start checking social media, and 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. means that you've also caught people on both sides of the United States. and 11 AM Monday morning is the same thing, except you have to add another hour because it's Monday morning. And if there's any day I really don't give a shit, it's definitely Monday morning. So the cool thing about sharing stuff through social media is content. Content is literally your biggest asset, and content can be pretty much anything. From a blog post, to you talking into a camera about one of your games, to screenshots, to gameplay videos. And the best way to share them is using social media. There's a variety of forms of social media that I'd like to talk about. I'll give you a quick rundown and you can sort of ask questions afterwards if you've got any specific questions about any of the platforms. Because I've got loads of time. Right, so the crucial platforms, I would say the big three are Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. And Twitter is pretty much a given. How many of you are on Twitter? Yeah. Right, cool. How many of you got YouTube channels as indie developers? Cool. How many of you have got Facebook pages? Not just personal profiles, Facebook pages. Cool, excellent, good. This is all going fairly well. I can just go home now, I suppose. But what's interesting about those three is that Twitter's well, pretty much, your standards, you tweet out the link to your game, you embed your content within the tweet, you make sure everyone can access it in sort of a timely and convenient manner, which is why we talked about timing. YouTube is the same. YouTube is a social network, unfortunately, which explains YouTube comments. But what the really interesting one I found actually out of the big three has always been Facebook. And the interesting thing about Facebook is when people share content on Facebook, they're not usually on a public platform. And what's interesting about that is it tends to change the way that people behave. So if I see a really cool game on YouTube, I can like it, or I can add it to a playlist of videos of games that I've really liked, and that's public platforms. In a way, I'm kind of aware that I'm showing other people on my social networks that I like this thing. And sometimes I'll tweet out stuff. That's cool. Sometimes I'll tweet out stuff that I think might be informative for other people. But generally, the reason that I'm engaging with the content on those social media platforms is because, I want to share it with the public. When I do it on Facebook, I'm just sharing it with my friends. And what I think is really interesting about that, and what I think is worth thinking about, is if you can kind of get your content on Facebook and get people to start sharing it through their own personal profiles and really focus on that for a bit, I feel like that's a really massive win, because at that point, they're not proving anything to anyone, they're not retweeting a video just because it's popular, they're actually turning to their mates as they would in a pub, but digitally, and saying, hey, this is really amazing, why don't you take a look? The other crucial platforms I would mention are things like Reddit, obviously, our gaming and our games. Are there any Redditors in the room? Any people use Reddit? Cool. And the interesting thing about Reddit is the way in which it calculates points. So when you see stuff go to the top of Reddit and you assume it's doing really well, it has, about 2,000 upvotes? What's really interesting is you go into the page, you can actually take a look, and the way Reddit calculates the overall score on the front page is it subtracts the number of downvotes from the number of upvotes. And what's interesting about that is how quickly it blows your mind when indie games and things like that reach the front page of our gaming, because that literally means that tens of thousands of people have used their own accounts to endorse your content. That's a really nice personal connection, and I really like that. And Reddit's also a really interesting platform because you can do AMAs. Has anyone ever read an AMA? Do people know what AMAs are? Is there anyone that doesn't know what an AMA is? Right, so an AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. And for an indie developer, that's fantastic. Because quite frequently, when you're trying to push stuff through social networks, it's pretty difficult, because on Twitter you've got 140 characters, and if you're writing a roguelike action platformer RPG about, your dead dog from last summer, it's kind of hard to concentrate all of that information into those 140 characters and include links and include hashtags. So Reddit's kind of like this really interesting, more long-form way of engaging with people, and you can have conversations, people come and approach you personally, it's got a messaging system. Of course, the downside of Reddit is that it does have a bit of dark side, and there are generally unpleasant people on there, but I would counter that with how many times have you watched a video of a really cute animal on YouTube and you scroll down, and no matter what the topic is, there are two people having an argument about evolution? It's almost a law of physics, and I really don't understand why it is the way it is. So, all of this is a bit intense. I know because I do it for a living, and having to think about pushing stuff through social media successfully on a regular basis is terrifying and stressful, and it's a lot of work. But I think the best way to look at it is kind of a three-step plan, which is that I would like each of you to kind of think about the social platforms that you like the most. So some of you might really like Tumblr, for example, and Tumblr's a great example of a social network that sometimes goes ignored, which is unfortunate because it's actually one of the most efficient ways of sharing artwork and video content and video games commentary that I've ever seen. Mainly because you can occasionally see some incredible screenshots from an upcoming indie game, and they might have, at the top end, maybe like 100 retweets. You see stuff take off from Tumblr, and the amount of notes reaches into like the 6 figures. It's very hard to track, but you know, if you like Tumblr, learn more about it, go look it up, see what's successful, see what isn't successful. Take a look at TigSource's Tumblr, and if you haven't done that already, I really, really do urge you to, because it's a really good way to see how to present the best things about your game. GIFs are a really good example. People used to use videos all the time. Video is like the go-to way to show a game in action. GIFs are actually incredibly common, and they're also part of our social media vocabulary these days. I mean, how many of you have used a GIF in the last week to reply to something? Exactly. I do it all the time, and I'm sure it annoys the absolute piss out of my friends. But it's, you know, they're just really good ways of kind of finding ways to. It's essentially what social media marketing is. It's finding ways to communicate the best things about the games that you're working on without just looking like a massive dickhead in a suit. So I'm going to jump straight in, and we're going to sort of take a look at the holy grail of social media marketing for an indie game developer, which is going viral. So from any sort of modern marketer's perspective, going viral is literally just the best thing that can happen ever, because you put some media about your game out there, you go to sleep with like 100 followers on Twitter, and you wake up, you're on the front page of every major gaming site there is. You've suddenly, you know, jumped up in followers by 10,000%, and a load of the press are asking you for builds. Going viral is a bit scary, if I'm totally honest, because a lot of people really aren't prepared for it. And although while you might have someone on staff to run the PR and help handle all the sudden press inquiries and things that your game is going to generate, what you might not know is sort of the ways to take advantage of it for marketing purposes. If you're suddenly really, really popular, that's great, but how do you capitalise on that, and how do you make sure it doesn't go disastrously wrong? So, one of the problems I found with going viral is that people tend to assume that it just happens, that it's just a thing where, they put up a video of their amazing game on YouTube and they're like, oh, this is fantastic, I've put like 3 tags in it, there's a really nice title, I've got a thumbnail of a dog, and then nothing happens, and they don't really understand why, and quite frequently that's generally because they've just stuck it on YouTube and that was it, and they kind of expected it to just sort of take off from there, and that's not really the way going viral works. The reason going viral works incredibly well for the people that do it deliberately is because they actually tend to use multiple platforms to allow all of these social networks to kind of feed all of this content with traffic. So if you have, alright, how many of you have just released a game trailer? Like 5, 6 people, okay, cool. How many of you have shared it on, have you shared it on one platform, more than one platform? Like, how hard are you pushing it? Because realistically, if you don't give people enough chances to see your stuff through the social media that they go through every single day, then what are the chances that people are going to discover you? You need to give people as many chances as possible. A really, really cool example actually was Lambert when they were marketing Ridiculous Fishing. rather than actually take the traditional route and do a big YouTube trailer and all of that MacGuffins, what they did was they made a Vine. And the Vine was genius because it told you exactly what you needed to know about the game in about 6 or 7 seconds. How many of you played Ridiculous Fishing? Right, so you kind of know the mechanics, right? So essentially Ridiculous Fishing game about fishing. Although that's just horrendous understatement. But the first 2 seconds or so was a hook going into the water. The second 2 seconds was a hook coming back up and catching fish. And the rest of it was fish being thrown into the air and blown the fuck away with a variety of wonderfully beautiful weaponry. But the amazing thing about that was in 6 or 7 seconds, it told you literally about all 3 mechanics. You knew what the name of the game was. It was incredibly shareable. And it takes less than 10 seconds to watch. It was the perfect game advert. And what was really interesting was there was actually there was a AAA games company that then did a Vine, I think maybe Battlefield, that did a Vine of their own content not long afterwards, which I'm sure was in no way connected whatsoever. But it's just something that's worth thinking about, because you do have all these really amazing tools. Like, for example, I thought, just for fun, I would make a Vine account called Indie Vines. And what I wanted to do with that account was, I go to a lot of indie events, go to London Indies every month, and I play a lot of indie games at home. So I wanted to make vines of those small games as little art pieces and get them up on Twitter and see how they did. And it wasn't going to make any money out of it, they weren't my games, I just kind of wanted to circulate the stuff that you guys were making that I thought was absolutely incredible. So I did. And the amazing thing about that was that nobody had actually really done it before. So the moment people found out it existed, people like Renaud Godard and Zoe Quinzel and people like that kind of jumped on it, and the follower count flew up. Because if there's no channel for people to check out your games on socially, and then all of a sudden there is, they'll jump on that because it's really convenient. Like, I tend to tweet and use Facebook IM to talk to people rather than email these days. I mean, how many of you feel like you're kind of moving towards social media communication more than email outside work? Right, like, it really is sort of like our default method of communication. So, right, say you've done your Vine and it's gone viral and it's hit the front page of Reddit and Kotaku are raving about it shortly before they write some horribly inflammatory piece that destroys somebody's life. You kind of have to deal with the reality of going viral. And the reality of going viral is, yeah, like I said earlier, it can be pretty scary. But the one tip I would give you is if you're looking at content for your game and you're making trailers and you're working hard on screenshots and stuff, the one thing I'd say for viral is always make sure every asset about your game and all the ways to play it are off your own website. Use your own website as a hub to link to everything else, by all means. But don't self-host your videos, don't self-host your screenshots just there if you can avoid it. Because what happens is if all your stuff is there and people become really, really interested in your game, there's a large amount of them, 200,000 people try to access your website in the space of an hour, it dies. And it goes down, and no one can find out about your game, no one can watch any trailers or look at the screenshots and things like that. And then you're stuck. Because but the cool thing about YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and things like that is because they're such large social networks, they're built with a huge amount of stress testing and redundancy. It's really, really unlikely that they're going to go down. So always, make sure if you're really aiming to get your stuff out there that you're not risking a point at which nobody can actually find their way to the stuff that you're using to, communicate to people about your game. So, a lot of people really also don't really always like social media. It does have a dark side to it, and I speak as somebody that once had the fan base of the Yogscast turned on him for 24 hours. It can be really unpleasant. But the awesome thing about it is that it actually, for me, allows what makes the indie scene so beautiful come to the fore. And what I love about the indie scene is that I look at EA and I look at BioWare and stuff, and I see companies, but I can look at entire studio teams, even as large as Double Fine, and I see people. There's a beautiful thing about indie companies is that there's kind of less of a PR wall. Everything isn't shiny, everything isn't, really kind of white and sprayed and clean and things. People are real people, and you get people that do vlogs about how frustrated they are about, how a game is going. No one at Bioware is going to risk their job by putting that up on YouTube, but you can. And the amazing thing about that and putting that through social media is you would be amazed at how many people play games genuinely do give a shit that your collision detection isn't working and you're having a bad day. Social media is an amazing way to allow people to connect with you as people, and that's what's going to sell your games. The reason Minecraft sells, I think, at least in part, to being an incredibly good game that went viral, is because Mojang are an incredibly friendly company, and Notch is an incredibly friendly person. And that comes through all the time in social media. The same goes for Rami Ismail, and the same goes for Mike Bithell. All of these people are very approachable, very friendly, very calm, very communicative. And you can be like that. Obviously, I know it's daunting. It is a bit scary. Obviously, as someone who, personally sort of deals with, some degree of social anxiety, I can understand that going on social media and approaching people about your game is terrifying. No one's saying it's not. But, it's just a good way to be a person, and not just be another company trying to sell the latest iOS release. So, and the cool thing is that social media is a bit futuristic and a bit fucked up and a bit weird, but it's also really fun. Literally, I would say that I've got a whole bunch of friends in this room, and I've met every single one of them through Twitter, and I think that's actually pretty incredible. And the same goes for the people that have written about my games. I mean, I've written games about all sorts of silly bullshit, from hugging aliens to having like a hardcore Westboro religious mum. And it's, as you can imagine, that's a bit of an awkward sell, if I'm honest. Especially if you're my dad. He's lovely, really doesn't. But the cool thing about it is that I was kind of able to connect with people and sort of sidestep the whole marketing wall. I didn't need to make big infographics, and I didn't need to think heavily about content strategy or converting people into evangelists, although James is completely right. Using social media to turn people into evangelists for your games is incredibly nice, and don't get freaked out by the word. Because all that means, generally, I find most of the time for indies, is someone is so enthusiastic at this point about your game and how nice you've been on social media and how transparent you've been, that they just want to shout about your game all the time. And those people are invaluable, and the same goes for YouTube Let's Play, which is something that we should really talk about. Because recently, Mike Bithell and a few other people have released statements on their websites and social media saying it is okay for a YouTube Let's Play commentator to make content about my games, and I'm not going to make a copyright claim. All of you should do that, without exception, because the Let's Play community are just mind-blowing in the amount of marketing force that they will generate behind the game that you're working on. Because it's literally, I made the smallest bash game, an entire group of people, sit through the whole thing and play through it and talk and then upload it. And imagine if that happened 150 times. That's 150 full-length videos produced by other people for free. Now, I know I said never work for free earlier today, but the Let's Play community are paid through advertising and things like that. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. So, feel free to reach out to that community about games. I mean, they even have their own forum where they talk about YouTube strategy and, how to make their Let's Play videos go further and things like that. Get in touch, because these people do want interesting material. Because the moment an interesting indie game gets snapped up by the Yogscast or PewDiePie or whatever, that becomes the #1 destination, unfortunately, to watch content about that game. But if you happen to nail some of the people who aren't at the top of the YouTube ladder and say, hey, here's my latest indie game, here's here's a link to a copy of it, feel free to kind of, make a video about it, and they do, and it takes off. It's just a great thing, and it's free, it's easy, and you might end up with more friends as a result, friends within the indie community and the YouTube community combined. So, this is something that I got sent at work this week, and it's called the Periodic Table of Content Marketing. To me, when I saw it, I made a noise that I usually only make when I look at incredibly, really, really tasty food. It wasn't, I'm not even sure if it was completely human noise, to be totally honest. To you, it's just fucking nonsense, I imagine. But what's interesting about it is it really showcases like a huge variety of content that can be shared about your games and a way in which you can share it. And it's got areas for like the way it's shared and the emotions and sharing triggers. And sharing triggers are pretty interesting because there are a lot of set primal emotions that people use when they interact with media, and learning about emotion and emotional reaction when it comes to sharing your stuff through social media is incredibly important. Learn what makes people excited, learn what makes people scared and what makes people angry, because extreme emotions tend to be what ends up getting people to share stuff on social media. Because I don't know about you, but like if I have a completely normal bus journey, nothing happens. If you have a bus journey where like it stops at every stop and then the bus breaks down and then somebody is racist, like I will tweet endlessly for the rest of the day about a terrible bus journey. But the same goes for positive experiences. Like I saw a trailer for, has anyone seen the trailer for the indie game Routine? Yeah. I saw that and it took me about 2 hours to calm down afterwards. I was so excited. I got in touch with them and social media, and they got in touch with me, and we've had really, really nice conversations for about a year now. And at least every 2 months I tweet the trailer again and rave about how amazing it is, and I'm not being paid, although I'd like to be. But it goes to show about just how far being friendly goes, making your content accessible as well. Like it was hosted on YouTube, it was available in high definition, I hope. And it was also on TikTok's front page, which means that clearly the indie community knew about it, picked up on it. And TikTok is run, as far as I'm aware, still by Derek Hughes, an indie himself, responsible for Spelunky. So also use social media to connect with other indies, because seriously, I've seen this demonstrated today when I was getting wound up for this talk. Like these guys, the people in the room with you have your back like nobody else. Like you could approach 1,000 gamers and you get a certain degree of loyalty. Approach another indie, it's 100% every time. Like all of you are amazing to each other all the time. So do take advantage of that when you want people to shout about the stuff you're doing. I know it's time consuming and it's annoying. And it's also time consuming when I'm at work, because I do this stuff all the time at work. And I've actually found the easiest way for me is I build calendars and schedules. Like if you've got like one of those big paper calendars, you want to do it on a computer that has like all the days of the month, funnily enough, as calendars tend to do. Just take 20 minutes and say, alright, every Friday I'm going to get a new gameplay video up on YouTube, and I'm going to tweet about it at these times, and I'm going to put it on Facebook, and I'm going to push it to the indie groups and the gaming groups and Reddit and things like that. And then every Tuesday, I'm going to write a blog post. It's 2 bits of content a week, but it's also the best part of 10 bits of content a month, and that builds up over time. And over time, people's searches for your game on YouTube return more and more content, because then they can watch more and more and get more and more excited, and that's what it's about. So, when you're launching stuff, what tends to happen is things are a bit manic, which is why I'm talking about scheduling. Just take the time. It takes a very short period of time. It means you're a lot more organised. It means you're a lot calmer. Because you don't want to be stressed about marketing bullshit when you're trying to make sure that someone isn't falling through the floor on the 3rd level. So, just kind of be organised and, just breathe everything out, and you've saved yourself months of stress. So that's basically what you need, is your content checklist or a timeline. Definitely invest in a furry animal. I don't have furry animal, I just have pillows, what I may do. Make sure you grant permission to YouTube, and don't panic, it's fine. And obviously I am on Twitter like all the fucking time. You can reach me via email, you can definitely reach me on Twitter. I've got like 996 followers and it's driving me fucking mad, so by all means please feel free to click the button. Thank you very much. Any questions?
So I might be about to commit heresy in this room, but I tweet.
I already have.
That's okay, but I tweet about stuff other than game development as well.
So do I. I'm actually most well known for tweeting about Iron Brew.
So the problem is then that people who follow me will occasionally get information about games either I'm playing or writing, and will occasionally get stuff about my gardening or the fact that Simon was saying in school choir. And presumably your argument about getting to know the people rather than games would promote that.
Yeah.
But I guess the problem is people have to sit through a lot of fairly boring pictures of like bugs I found in the garden to get to every now and again a vine about the game.
Well, as long as there's some degree of balance, I mean, do talk about yourself occasionally. Do also talk about the bugs you found in your game. Put it that way.
It's true, yeah, good.
But yeah, just definitely tweet about. Don't stop tweeting about stuff in your garden. I'm interested about what goes on in your garden. I have a fear of bugs, but I'm interested. Any other questions? Don't send me pictures of spiders, please. Cool.
But with that in mind, is it worth creating a separate account for your product again?
No. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever seen was Indie Game the Movie created a Twitter account called Indie Game the Movie, which has about, like 10,000 followers. I don't know what the fuck they're planning to do when they release their next film, because their account's called Indie Game the Movie. So if you are going to create a separate account, the only reason I would do it is if you're a studio. If you're more than one person, create another account by all means, and then you can use that as an aggregate for your other social stuff. But yeah, no, definitely don't separate it. Like the reason I find indies interesting to follow on Twitter is because it is that mix of the professional and the personal. Cool. All right. If you've got any questions, feel free. I'm at the pub all night. So yeah, cheers. Thanks so much.